Well, I kind of feel terrible. I came to the shop. I'm here right now. Do some lead tech work. They asked me to come in and kind of act like the lead tech today, supervisor, kind of whatever, blah, blah, blah. And came in, picked up a Transit that they were having an issue with a 3.7 liter NA, and it was misfiring. So swapped coils from 4 to 5, misfire went with it. Also had a misfire 1, 2, and 3. Well, I can't swap coils on that because I got to pull the intake manifold. I told the customer, I said, I know for sure we're going to probably need plugs and ignition coils, without a doubt. And this thing's only got 85,000 miles on it. I don't know the condition of it. I was kind of thrown right into it, saying that it's already been kind of looked at by other people, just figure out the misfire stuff. So I figure out the misfire with cylinder 4, and I know its plugs look terrible, ignition coils smell super burnt, and continues to misfire on bank 1, cylinders 1, 2, and 3. So I told the customer, look, this is a starting point. I'm not going to go through and diagnose this completely right this second. I need to start with a tune-up on this vehicle, but here's the problem. Ford notoriously has an issue with water spilling over the plastic cowl down on top of the engine. Your vehicle has extremely rusty valve cover bolt or intake manifold bolts and ignition coil bolts. When I go to pull those ignition coils out of there, they're probably going to snap inside the valve cover, and I'm going to have to replace it. Well, the guy says, let me come in and see what you're talking about. So he comes in. He's got this intake manifold with all this slime and grit and stuff in it. And I said, man, some of that's been sucked back into the engine as well. And I showed it to him, and he's like, damn, I just bought this thing. I wish I would have had an inspection done. And I said, well, I always recommend people taking the vehicle for an inspection. You probably bought somebody else's problem, but it doesn't look like anybody's taking care of this vehicle really well. And he says, okay, you know what? I need the vehicle. I do roofing and siding and everything. Just fix it. I don't really care. Just fix it. So I says, okay, well, where I'm at right now is I know I got a cylinder 4 misfire. It's an ignition coil for sure, but I want to change plugs with it. If I pull this intake, or if I pull these ignition coils, I'm probably going to snap 1 or 2 of the bolts off inside the plastic valve cover. That means I'm going to have to replace the valve cover. Are you prepared for that? He says, just go ahead and do it. And the intake manifold, I'm going to probably snap the bolts off in a couple of those locations, but we'll see. I might be able to get away with it. Maybe it'll be fine. And he says, you know what, just go ahead and move forward. Whatever you need to do, just do it. So I go through. Sure enough, cylinders 4 and 5 snap the ignition coil. No, 4 and 6 snap the ignition coil bolts. I knew I needed a valve cover. Got that coming right away. Then I go to pull the intake manifold bolts out, and a couple of them were stubborn, and I had to work them back and forth, back and forth, back and forth. And finally they came out without breaking. I was able to clean up the holes and stuff real good. And when I got to the passenger side, the ignition coil bolts for 1, 2, and 3 were extremely rusty. I'm talking extremely rusty, but somehow I was able to get them out. Pull the spark plugs out of that side, ignition coils out of that side, replaced everything, put all new, put the intake manifold and stuff back together, new valve cover on the driver's side, ignition coil, spark plugs. The vehicle's running great. Sitting there just purring. Then all of a sudden, out of nowhere, I hear this brrr, 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 brrr. Let me show you a clip of what it sounds like. Now that it's running good and it's not misfiring right away, listen to the catalytic converter on the passenger side. Yep, needs a catalytic converter, and I think Ford only sells the white pipe. So probably Ford does sell the white pipe for like $1,900, or you can get one individual side for like $2,100. So you can piece it in, but it costs more to piece it in, they said. So it's better to just buy the whole white pipe. And then with dropping the subframe down to replace the white pipe, this is what you run into. Let me show you real quick. Somewhere around $2,200–$2,300, and then got to drop the subframe out, and guess what? just like all the other Transits. The subframe in this one, it's fucked. It's rotten all the way across. You can put your hand inside the frame. And the frame behind the exhaust, and look, somebody's already done one side catalytic converter, but they didn't do the other side. Yep, the subframe's got to be replaced too. So after asking more questions to the customer, I said, hey, when this vehicle was misfiring and the light was flashing on the dash, did you keep driving the vehicle? And he says, oh yeah, I was driving it. I didn't know what anything was going on. I said, oh man, if it's misfiring and you're driving it, it will damage the catalytic converter depending on whatever side it is. And he says, oh no, I just kept driving it until it got so bad that I didn't really have a lot of power whenever I go to stomp on the gas. But if I go real slow, I'm fine. If I start easing into it, I'm fine. But then all of a sudden it starts breaking up and misfiring real bad. I said, yeah, it does, because the catalytic converter on that side, on the passenger side, is melted. So now you're talking, you know, $1,900 for a new Y pipe, 7 to 10 hours of labor because I got to drop the cross member. The cross member is rotten. I'm not going to put that cross member back in there with those rotten bolts. So you're going to need all new subframe bolts. You're going to need cross member bolts. You're going to need new lower control arms because I ain't putting in those rotten bushing lower control arms back in the vehicle. So yeah, you just bought this, but you bought somebody else's problem. So now you have to reap what you, I mean, I guess you could say what you sow. Because it's going to be something around like 4.5 hours for the tune-up and the intake job, drilling the bolts out, the valve cover, plus the price of all that. And then you're going to have to spend another 7 to 10 hours on a subframe, a catalytic converter system. I mean, by the time it's all said and done, you probably put close to $5 grand in this car, and it's got 85,000 miles on it. And it's already that rotten. Terrible. I feel bad for the guy. I mean, now what do you do? I wish I could have, or did. I wish I caught that catalytic converter issue earlier in the rotten subframe. But when the vehicle was given to me, it was given to me kind of, it was already warmed up and it wasn't making the noise whenever it was driven in. It wasn't until after I was able to get cylinder 4 to clear up and change the spark plugs, ignition coils, everything else, and now you can really, no matter if you, anytime you hit the gas, you can hear that catalytic converter rattling. Nightmare Transit tune-up turns into a $5,000 job. I like the Transits, but man, they got a lot of problems like that. Subframe problems, control arm problems, water leaking off of the plastic cowl onto the engine. Alright, I'm going in with a new valve cover. That right there I got to fix. And then this one right here, I already fixed it. Those two broke. And then everything else is pretty clean going back together. Alright, I got both spark plugs here. Well, both spark plugs. I got 6 spark plugs here. And part number for it is SP589 or CYFS 12YT6. It's a platinum plug. Got the valve cover in. I had to cut the threads for 2 new bolts right there. And got those in. Everything's bolted down. Time to start putting it all back together. Got new ignition coils too, because the other ones, they smelled really burnt. 7T4Z 12029E or DG520. Anyhow, let's get it together. And of course, you've seen it together. It was running when it was on the rack, and I was trying to show you the big hole all the way across the subframe, but it was really hard to see all these transits, they do that. They rot out right on the front of the subframe all the way across. Yeah, so you've seen it running, you heard it running, you heard the rattle and stuff. That's really all I got for you, you know. So take care, be blessed.